So, it has been more than a month since I bought the Sony ZV-E1 and I absolutely love it. It's small and portable, making it ideal for travel. The dynamic stabilization and autofocus performance are outstanding. It captures amazing 4K video with a wide dynamic range and minimal rolling shutter, and the battery life is excellent. This camera, in my opinion, is ideal for someone like me who creates social media content. However, it's not quite perfect, so before you buy one, let me point out a few flaws and limitations that I found with this camera. Starting with the elephant in the room, overheating. This is probably the camera's biggest flaw. Because it's so small but shoots high quality footage, it overheats relatively quickly when compared to other Sony full-frame cameras in this price range. I made a whole video about overheating on this camera, you can watch it here, and basically the results I got were that in a studio environment with a room temperature of about 23-24 degrees Celsius, you should be fine recording up to 2 hours in 4K 24 or 25p and up to 20-30 minutes in 4K 50 or 60p. Personally, I've filmed about 10 videos with this camera and have never experienced overheating in real-world scenarios. Regardless, here are some tips for dealing with overheating on the Sony ZV-E1. Tip number 1 is to open all of the port doors and the battery door to dissipate heat more quickly. I'm not sure how well it works because I haven't tried it, but I've seen people online get extra recording time by doing this. Tip number 2 is to attach a mini fan to the back of the camera to help cool it down. Again, I'm not sure how well it works or if the fan will cause audio issues, but I think it's worth a shot if you're recording for long periods of time, especially in 4K 50 or 60p. Finally, in the power setting option, set the auto power off temp to high. This will significantly increase recording times while avoiding overheating. I leave this setting on all the time and I don't think it's going to cause any issues. As far as I know, this is totally safe. Moving on to body design, let's start with the ergonomics, which aren't the best on this camera. The grip is small and quite uncomfortable, and holding the camera for extended periods of time quickly becomes annoying. However, I'm willing to live with that because I like the compact form factor of the Sony ZV-E1, and you can easily fix this issue by buying a grip cage or the new Peak Design micro clutch grip attachment. The ZV-E1 is also dust and moisture resistant. However, I'm not so sure how it will work because the microphones on top are completely exposed to the elements, and in rainy weather, water could easily get into the camera. So I would be really cautious when using this camera in rainy or snowy conditions. It's not really a big deal for me because I never use my cameras in these type of conditions. However, it's something worth considering before buying this camera. The ZV-E1 also has only a micro HDMI port, one SD card slot, and no mode dial. I rarely use external monitors, so the micro HDMI port is unimportant to me. However, it would have been nice to see a full-sized HDMI port. The single SD card slot is also not a big deal for me. When I had the Sony a7 IV, I rarely used both slots. However, the lack of a mode dial for quickly changing custom presets is a huge disappointment for me. I got so used to it when I had the Sony a7 IV and I wish this camera had it as well. But if you want a quick workaround, you can create custom presets using memory recall and assign it to a custom button or the function menu. There are a few other annoying things such as the lack of a joystick, not having enough buttons to customize, the presence of only 2 dials instead of 3, and the zoom rocker can sometimes get in the way. The lack of a joystick is very annoying because it forces you to use the touch screen to move the focus point. I'm used to it, but if you're not a fan of touch screens, this can be an issue. In terms of custom buttons and only having 2 dials, there are more than enough buttons to customize for my personal workflow, but it's nowhere near as good as the a7 IV, for example. In comparison to the much cheaper ZV-E10, you only get 1 extra button to customize on the ZV-E1. And only having 2 dials is a bummer. I wish Sony had included a front dial so we could have ISO, shutter, and aperture dials. Fortunately though, I only shoot at the base ISO of 640, so don't really change the ISO very often. Finally, the zoom rocker on this camera can get in the way when shooting handheld, which is very annoying. I frequently find myself accidentally hitting it with my hand, enabling clear image zoom. Surprisingly, it has never happened to me with the Sony ZV-E10, probably because the camera is smaller, but it happened to me so many times with the ZV-E1 that I had to completely disable clear image zoom so I wouldn't accidentally enable it when shooting handheld. Now let's talk about the software side of things. Sony plans to add support for 4K 120 to the ZV-E1 in the future, but it's unclear when exactly this will happen. And some people online claim that this will be a paid firmware upgrade. I hope this is not the case, because this camera is already expensive as it is, and paying for features that this camera was advertised with will be a real bummer. Lastly, the ZV-E1 doesn't have separate photo and video settings or the APS-C crop mode, so while you can separate some photo/video settings such as aperture, metering mode, picture profile and focus mode, it's not as customizable as, say, the Sony a7 IV. However, I rarely shoot photos with the ZV-E1, and when I do, separating the basic settings is more than enough for me. As for the lack of an APS-C crop mode, I can't really blame Sony, because the ZV-E1 sensor has only 12 megapixels, which isn't enough for a proper APS-C crop like the 33 megapixel sensor on the a7 IV. But clear image zoom with autofocus is now available, so you can get some cropping with a minimal loss of image quality. But it's worth noting that it's upscaling the quality, resulting in minor detail loss. To summarize, the Sony ZV-E1 is an excellent camera that I absolutely love using. I was actually really worried when I sold my Sony a7 IV for this camera, but now that I have it for over a month, I absolutely love it. It is expensive, the ergonomics aren't the best, it can overheat fairly quickly in some situations, and the single SD card slot can be a real disadvantage for some. It does, however, have fantastic image quality with a wide dynamic range, a compact portable design that allows you to take it anywhere, and phenomenal autofocus and stabilization performance. If you, like me, create YouTube content and want a high-end camera, I think the ZV-E1 is a great choice. I'm really happy with my purchase. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, let me know down below, and I guess I'll see you again soon. Bye.